You saw it for 3.5 hours in Columbia on Saturday night, but maybe you still don't believe it. Wow. South Carolina put up 63 on Tennessee, knocked those Vols down the college football playoff rankings. We got Chris Phillips on the line from the Spurs Up Show, spursup.com. You see it right there, the spursupshow.com. Chris, how are we doing tonight?
Mark, I'm doing fantastic. Like you mentioned, man, it's a little bit hard to believe that we're sitting here having this conversation. I'm still almost a bit in shock, if you will. I think if I wasn't there in person watching it, rushing the field myself, I don't know if I actually would have believed that it happened. But luckily, we woke up on Sunday, and I realized it wasn't a dream, and it really did take place, and the Gamecocks have derailed the Tennessee Volunteers playoff hopes. But doing well, man. Happy early Thanksgiving to you and yours. Appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to talking some ball as always.
This is why everybody that goes out there and uses the transitive property, we can just throw that away for anything. And I'm a big resume guy. There's the 10-game resume. That's the 11-game resume, that sort of thing. But when there's no way you can figure out how that's possible when you see South Carolina score 6 points against Florida, and then you see Florida go lose to Vandy. There's just no way you can add this up and it can make any sense. So I'm going to ask you the impossible, Chris, and I'm going to ask you to explain how South Carolina did that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned 6 points against Florida, Mark. Those weren't even offensive points. That was special teams. So you got shut out on the offensive side. You go from getting shut out against Florida on offense, the 13th ranked defense in the SEC, to putting up 63 points against Tennessee. I mean, you think about it, Mark. You scored 9 touchdowns. You came into that game against Tennessee with 18 total touchdowns in SEC play. Spencer Rattler threw 6 touchdowns. That was more than he had the entire month of October, and that included games against SC State and Charlotte. So, I mean, you just think about what had to happen. And you asked the question, right, Mark? Like, try to explain the impossible, if you will, because I gave this team no chance also, and it was a lot to do because the offensive side, and I thought this team was just dead offensively. You've heard Shane Beamer talk about it, and Mark, around these parts, the number one question this week has been, well, who was calling the plays, right? Who was really the mastermind behind it? And Shane Beamer has said adamantly, it was Marcus Satterfield. It was Marcus Satterfield. And I'm not saying that I'm calling Beamer a liar by any means, but as you and I both know, Mark, I mean, it's coach speak in these pressers, right? They're not going to be forthcoming about everything. I guess it took getting embarrassed in Gainesville for somebody to finally say, okay, we are changing something. And Shane Beamer even admitted in his Tuesday presser that was the simplest offensive game plan, Mark, they had all season. And that's what it looked like on the field. I mean, it was a football team that was playing free, playing loose. There wasn't a whole lot of this check with me before the snap. They had been doing very slow and monotonous. It was very much just, hey, get the play, let's go. Spencer Rattler, get the ball, go through your reads, get it out quick. I thought you saw him obviously play free. And I mean, I'll tell you this, Mark, when you talk about great games by quarterbacks at the University of South Carolina, that game Spencer Rattler put together on Saturday, that might be the greatest game of all time by a quarterback in Garnet and Black. I mean, really, truly, 30 of 37, 438, 6 touchdowns on the night. I mean, he was masterful, right? And he showed why he was so clamored after, or why he was so sought after, I should say. He showed he still got it, right? He's still that guy. So, I mean, he was on all night. When you have a quarterback play like Rattler, the coaches talk about, well, the plays are there, it's on execution. You saw the execution in effect on Saturday night. And then you finally saw some of the Gamecocks playmakers shine because of it. I said, I keep saying, Mark, that I was shocked, I was stunned, but I'm not surprised that South Carolina, like, to see these playmakers making plays. We felt like all season these guys were there. I don't think anybody was expecting Carolina to score 63 a game, but that's, Mark, what was so frustrating is guys like Antoine Wells, Dak Joyner, Josh Vann, Jalen Brooks, Amarian Brown, Jaheim Bell. I mean, they're all playmakers. They didn't forget how to play football. It looked like an offense that finally they simplified. They played to their strengths. I think they took advantage of a Tennessee defense. That's not great by any means, but better than Florida, at least statistically. So, I mean, it just all clicked. And, I mean, them scoring 9 touchdowns, you could have given me a million guesses at what would have happened on Saturday night. And I just would have never seen that coming. So, I mean, to go from what, again, like you mentioned, to go from what you did in Gainesville to that, it's stunning. It's stunning, to say the least.
There are South Carolina fans that, regardless of whether Shane Beamer ever accomplishes anything, are still going to look back on that night as a magical night in and of itself. That felt amazing. That was incredible. But the big question is, what do you parlay that into? You got to parlay that into consistent wins against quality teams, and then program building, and we will know 2 or 3 years from now whether that was truly just, hey, that was fun. Or that was a breakthrough. And now you're staring at Clemson. So on one hand, you can look at it as, wow, this must have gotten Clemson's attention. Or is it going to be difficult to reach that high again? Not that you got to score 63 points again, but to put it all together against a legitimate top 10 team in the country.
Mark, I think you phrase it beautifully too in regards to you can look at it one of two ways, right? Like, it's great to have momentum, but from the Gamecock side of things, so many Gamecock fans, Mark, if you talk to them or if you kind of read around and listen to what they're saying, is like, well, here comes the typical Gamecock letdown game. And what's interesting about that is that, that's sort of a narrative that floats around. And I feel like a lot of fan bases probably say that about their own team as well. It's like, God, we can just never, because very few teams, Mark, let's call it for what it is. Very few teams play at that high of a level on a week in, week out basis outside of the elites, right? It's hard to sustain that level of play. There's so much parity in college football. But, Mark, I thought a stat that's really interesting from the gambling side of things, South Carolina following an against the spread win, which obviously they did against Tennessee, right? Following an against the spread win, the Gamecocks are 1-9-1 in their last 11 against the spread. So maybe it's not just a narrative. South Carolina has not done a good job of, 1 week they overachieve and by the numbers, by the stats, the next week they underachieve. So, they'll be fighting that trend also. 7-0 at night, 0-4 in the day. This kickoff is at noon. Clemson's won 40 in a row at home. They've won 7-0 or 7 in a row in the rivalry. So, there's some negative trends, but as last weekend showed us, right, throw all that out the window. And especially in a rivalry game, all those numbers really don't mean jack, right? So, putting together back-to-back impressive performances, or at least, and I love what Steven Garcia said on our show on Monday, Mark, is that, offensively, right, nobody's expecting to go 63. Clemson's got a great defense. Their front seven, arguably the best in college football. Shane Beamer praised as the best. I think Kirby Smart might have something to say about that, but one of the best in the country. And, it's a much better defense you saw against Tennessee, but you've set the standard now offensively. Right? Like, I just don't think you have the built-in personnel excuse. You've got talent. You've got playmakers, and it's all about how you utilize them. Now, again, that's not saying you should go out there and score 60 against Clemson. You go out there and you lose 27-24 or 31-28, and you put up a good offensive fight or whatever, you can tip your cap to an opponent, right? But there's no more room for any of these inexcusable performances like we saw against Florida. So, that's the big question, Mark. Can South Carolina put together back-to-back performances? That's the question that I have. Which Gamecock team is going to show up? Clemson, very good football team. I think they're flawed. I think they're mortal, if you will. I don't think they're one of the best 4 teams in college football. If they get in the playoff, I think they're going to get boat raced. But, give them credit. They've taken care of their business outside of the Notre Dame game. But this game, to me, Mark, not taking anything away from Clemson, because, again, they've got talent all over the place, but this game's about South Carolina. It's just which team shows up. That is the question. That's what I sit here on this Wednesday, Mark. I admittedly, I don't make my predictions till Friday, but I admittedly normally have a pretty good feel on what I'm going to pick, even like Monday, Tuesday, if you will. I keep going back and forth because I just don't know who's going to show up, right? And I don't know that it's necessarily going to be, you're not going to get a 63-point performance like you had against Tennessee. I also don't think you're going to get shut out like you did against Florida. It's somewhere in the middle, but the question is, what is it closer to? I think that's the big question. So
it's funny that you phrased it like that, because we had our Clemson guy on a couple of days ago, and the very first thing I said to him was, I pretty much know what Clemson team's going to show up on Saturday, because that team's been showing up every week. One of the best defenses in the country and a very challenged offense. And they've beaten everybody decent in the ACC by a decent margin, but they're not blowing people out because they're just not that good. But they're the better team, and that's what's showing up week to week for Clemson. I said, when it comes to South Carolina, I don't know who's going to show up.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's at Jekyll or is it Hyde, right? It's just, but again, you've set the standard offensively. You know you have playmakers, and again, it's a different challenge with the Clemson defense. Also, though, focusing on the other side, Will Shipley killed you last year, and Maffa's a great running back too. But I think if South Carolina's defense can turn this into a game where, and it's much easier said than done, obviously, but you can limit the running game, right? If you're not going to completely take it away. If you can limit Shipley, limit Maffa, get them in some 3rd and longs, and put the game on the shoulder of DJU, right? He's been solid in spots, but he's also had some spots where he's been really bad, right? He just has not been great. So, I think that's their best bet defensively is make him go beat you. I think the Gamecocks, from what I'm hearing behind closed doors, it sounds like they do trust their secondary. They're going to let their guys go man on man, mano a mano, and I think it's a smart move, right? Your secondary, one of the best in the SEC, I'd say. You look at the turnover numbers, and you look at guys like Cam Smith, Darius Rush, the young guys like DQ Smith, Nicky Memori that are playing really, really good football for you. They trust those guys, and I think they should. So I think you got to sell out on stopping the run on the Clemson side, on your side, on offense. I think attacking that secondary, right? Spencer Rattler needs to be on again. It's crazy. We go from this time last week, Mark, folks were clamoring for, maybe we'd do better with Luke Doty. Maybe we should bench Rattler. He's not that good. To Mark, if Spencer Rattler wins this game, if Spencer Rattler goes out and balls out and wins this game, I think he's certified as a Gamecock legend forever. I mean, I really do. I know that seems crazy, but if you're able to, they remember November, right? That's what we all say. And if you can close out the season, solidified 8-4 year, and do it in back-to-back wins against top 10 opponents, and one of those was the arch rival on the road, I think the way he'll be viewed forever, I mean, I will certainly look at him with admiration for what he did for the University of South Carolina. So, I think attacking the passing game, stopping the run, the offensive line got a big challenge as well, though, right? That Clemson defensive front, they've got to be able to give Rattler time. But it should be a fun one. But again, like you said, which Gamecocks team shows up, which offense. And I think South Carolina needs to come in and attack just like they did against Tennessee. That's what I loved seeing, that they played with nothing to lose, right? Cam Smith with the postgame quote, we let them hang, right? I mean, play the same way. I mean, because Carolina really, Mark, is playing with house money. You've already cashed the over. You've gotten to 7 wins. I mean, you obviously want to win this game, but I think South Carolina's best bet is to play that way. Go play free. Go play loose. Be on the attack. Be on the attack. Make Clemson beat you. Be the aggressor.
Chris, you used the term arch rival. And when I look at the SEC Eastern Division, you can take any other school, for me, from my perspective, and say, okay, it's Tennessee. Their rivals are X, Y, and Z. Kentucky, their rivals are X, Y, and Z. And I think that's because all those other schools have been in the league forever. In South Carolina, I know it's been a long time, 1992, but when you're my age, you remember when South Carolina was not an SEC member. Now they are. So those rivalries are newer. Now, when you're playing a Kentucky every year, when you're playing a Tennessee every year, you build up a rivalry, and it's different because you're competing within the division for a championship. But this one is just different, right? It's just serious, in-state, your neighbor, your family, you're all that.
Yeah. In this state, Mark, you're either garnet and black or orange and purple. I mean, it is pure hatred, right? It doesn't need conference ties or affiliations or championships on the line. This is the type of rivalry, Mark, where you ask members of both fan bases, both teams could go 0-11, but if they win that one game, that one final game, right? The season is made. You had a good year. So it's pure hatred for sure. Like you mentioned, I mean, families, houses divided, and, coworkers, people have to run into, it's serious. It's a huge game. Everybody in the state, we don't have pro sports, right? There are no pro sports. There's nothing else. Carolina, Clemson is it. And, I can't wait for the rivalry to be renewed. South Carolina, though, needs to do their part in regards to, the rivalry loses some luster when one side's winning every year, right? So, but either way, I still look at it as one of the best rivalries in college football and really in college sports in general. I think it's up there with like the Egg Bowl is one of the most underrated. The Egg Bowl, I think, is a very underrated rivalry. I mean, that is pure hatred, just hatred between the two.
I covered that for 7 years.
Yeah, Carolina Clemson is very, very much the same. It is absolute pure hatred. And it's just interesting the amount of folks that, again, houses divided, marriages, siblings, family members, all that stuff. It really runs deep, right? And it's tradition, it's family, and it means a whole lot to the people of this state.
And Chris, you're going to release your pick when?
Friday. I will drop that Friday. It's funny, Mark. Like if I felt convicted in a pick right now, I'd give it to you, but I really don't. I mean, I damn near may go on my show and flip a coin. I mean, I don't know. Like because it's what the tough thing is, Mark, when you're making picks, and one of my greatest challenges is that, there is that fandom side to you, but you have to remove that as much as possible and just see it for what it is and not what you want it to be, right? Because, of course, I want to believe that the best version of this South Carolina football team is going to show up and they're going to finally snap this streak. But then, you weigh in the statistics, you weigh in the numbers. And, I mean, obviously, I'm preaching the choir here with you, but it hits even harder when it's the rivalry and you want this one so bad. It's easy for me to say that, well, I mean, Carolina's going to lose to Tennessee. I don't hate them nearly to the level that I hate a Clemson, right? But now, listen, it's a challenge. I mean, realistically, Mark, I think you look at this game, there's a reason Clemson opened as a 16-point favorite, now 14.5. The roster, obviously, I don't think anyone would argue that South Carolina's roster is on the level of Clemson's, right? The way they've recruited has been fantastic for sure. Dabo's done a great job. But, I think it's one of those games, Mark, I go back to what I said over the summer that, if there's something that gives me confidence, and it would have given me a lot more confidence had he been playing this way all season, but the Spencer Rattler we saw against Tennessee, maybe not to that level, but the way he played, that's the guy I expected to see all year. And if it comes down to a quarterback duel, which a lot of games in college football do, right, Mark? Mm-hmm. Sure. I feel confident in South Carolina. I do. And if Spencer Rattler plays 80% of what he did against Tennessee, in regards to him being on, the Gamecocks have got a great, great shot. I mean, I hate to put it all on him, but let's face it, it's a quarterback-driven game. So it was evident early that Spencer Rattler was sharp. Some of the throws he was making, just putting it right where he wanted it. If they can get that guy again, if he can stay hot, I like their chances.
Well, he has certainly done it before, and that's why that didn't necessarily surprise me against Tennessee. Chris Phillips here, thespursupshow.com. Catch him every weekday, 12 to 2. What's the best way to do that?
Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch. I would say YouTube is probably the most dependable platform, and we're live on all the other ones, but most people that comment are in YouTube. But yeah, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. That also drops on our podcast feed at 3 o'clock in case you missed it. And the full thing is on YouTube. You can go back and watch the replay. Podcast, of course, drops Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 a.m. Those days is when it actually releases. And yeah, the podcast itself on Friday that drops at 5 a.m., that will be the full breakdown, preview, storylines, matchups, keys to the game, and then finally my prediction as well. And we'll talk about it in the live show on Friday, of course, and it'll be out there for the masses to dissect and break down, and we can debate over it. And then, of course, Saturday we'll have kickoff. So, yeah, it's going to be a great weekend, man. Mark, I don't know if you've seen much on social media, but this is a great week for content for me because I pick and poke and prod at those Clemson people, and they give me exactly what I want, Mark. So it's been a fun week for yours truly, and I'm sure it's only going to get more fun as we continue.
For sure, for sure. Chris, we always enjoy the conversation with you, man. Happy Thanksgiving. You have a great weekend.
Happy Thanksgiving, Mark. Appreciate you.